the United States of America, a country that was a tennis powerhouse for decades, producing Grand Slam champion after Grand Slam champion, and number one after number one, was suddenly overshadowed by European stars that changed the game and dominated the tennis world for the past 20 years. But now, there seems to be a glimpse of hope for the US. Currently, 5 out of the top 20 players in the ATP ranking are Americans, something that hasn't happened since February of 1997. What makes that even better is that the average age of these 5 players is just 25, meaning that they're still developing and have many years ahead of them. So could this new generation of talent bring American tennis back to the top?
Ben Shelton soars into the US Open semi-finals.
Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe, Pete Sampras, and Andre Agassi. These are all Americans listed among the greatest tennis players of all time. But if you look closely, you'll see that they all had their prime before the 21st century. In fact, if we add up all the Open era Grand Slams played before the year 2000, we have 127 Grand Slams, of which an American player won 47 of them. That represents 37% of all Grand Slams played up to that point. However, since then, the USA has won merely 6 Grand Slams, coming from just 3 players: Sampras, Agassi, and the last American to win a Grand Slam, Andy Roddick with the 2003 US Open. This means that out of the 100 Grand Slams played in the past 25 years, only 6 of them were won by an American. And even worse, the USA has had no Grand Slam champions for the past 20 years. So what went wrong? It's more complex than just pointing at one specific reason, but it has a lot to do with the evolution of the sport. Here's what I mean. From the 1960s to the 1990s, tennis slowly shifted from a serve and volley style to a more baseline center game. This change was possible mainly due to the advancement in racket technology. Rackets evolved both in composition, moving from heavier materials like wood to lighter materials such as graphite, and in design, shifting from smaller heads to larger head sizes. The new rackets allowed players to generate more power on their shots, although still with limited topspin compared to today's game. At the same time, court surfaces remained mostly unchanged. This favored both aggressive baseliners like Agassi and big servers like Sampras. The combination of these powerful rackets and the typical fast hard and grass courts of the time led to shorter rallies, with points often ending in just a few shots. The culmination of this trend was the 1994 Wimbledon final between Pete Sampras and Goran Ivanisevic. In this match, there were very few rallies, and both players relied heavily on aces, even on their second serve.
Players averaging a couple aces a game here. Pete Sampras now capable of hitting aces on the second serve.
In fact, here's a stat shown during the match. In the first 186 points, there was only one rally over 4 shots. Following the match, spectators complained, and the media criticized the style of play. Although the change wasn't immediate, Wimbledon eventually changed the grass composition in the year 2000 in an attempt to slow down the ball. Over the following years, other grass and hardcourt tournaments followed the same changes, by either making courts slower or by using slower balls, to allow longer rallies. Evidence of that is this graph that shows the average rally length over the years on both grass and hard courts. Leading into the 90s, rallies were getting shorter and shorter, but just on the turn of the century, rally length suddenly increased and continued to rise into the 2000s. Given that the American style of play was based on total aggression, whether from the baseline or through serve and volley, the slowing of the court was a tough adjustment for those types of players. To make matters worse, racket technology continued to improve, and the introduction of polyester strings, popularized by the 3-time French Open champion Guga, allowed players to generate an unprecedented amount of topspin. These factors contributed to a more clay court-like style of play, with heavy topswing and longer rallies across all surfaces. It's important to mention that having Federer, Nadal and Djokovic, whose baseline consistency, movement and adaptability competing in the same era, is also partially why Americans struggled during the same period. But to be fair, the US still produced high-quality players after the changes. Roddick had great success in the beginning of his career.
Game, set, match, Roddick.
James Blake reached the career high of world number 4, and John Isner stayed in the top 20 for 10 years straight. But again, in an era where consistency from the baseline and court movement are crucial, it felt like these players were almost rowing against the tide of a changing sport. The American DNA of raw power, big serves, and aggression wasn't dead, but it needed to evolve. And so it did. Fast forward to today, the top Americans Taylor Fritz, Tommy Paul, Frances Tiafoe, Sebastian Korda, and Ben Shelton all shared the aggressive American DNA, but also a lot of the modern style, Korda may be the closest to a traditional aggressive baseliner, relying on a strong serve and clean ball striking off both forehand and backhand. In the other side of the spectrum, Tommy Paul is probably the one of the five who resembles a more modern tennis style. Being one of the best movers in the tour, he doesn't rely as heavily on his serve. Proof of that is that he ranks 5th on percentage of returns games won. Fritz, Tiafoe and Shelton all have big serve and forehand, but they can also hit a heavy topspin and move well on the court.
Well done, even with the slip.
Taylor Fritz's appearance in the US Open final marked the first time an American reached a Grand Slam final since Andy Roddick at Wimbledon in 2009. And if he'd won, it would have been the first American Grand Slam victory in 21 years. But the US is closer to a Grand Slam title than it's been in a very long time. In fact, if we take a step back and look at Grand Slam semi-final appearances, we'll see that after Andy Roddick's semi-final in 2009 and both Australian Open and US Open, the US went 12 years with only 2 players getting to the semis, Sam Cryer and John Isner, both at Wimbledon in 2017 and 2018. That until the last 3 years, with Tiafoe in 2022, Tommy Paul and Ben Shelton in 2023, and in this year, Tiafoe and Fritz at the US Open. These guys have gone into more semifinals in the past 3 years than the prior 14 years combined. The best part? These 5 players are still young and have much more to show. The oldest of them is Tommy Paul, and he's only 27, meaning their prime years are still ahead. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm optimistic, but I'm also realistic. While I do believe they have the potential to win Grand Slams, I don't expect them to be as dominant as legendary Americans of the past. Those players not only won titles, but dominated eras, especially when we consider the level that players like Alcaraz and Sinner have shown to be able to play, winning multiple Grand Slams at such a young age. Still, these young Americans have proven to have the tools needed in today's game and that they can compete on the biggest stages. Also, if the US has in fact adapted to the modern game, there will be more young American players climbing the ranking in the upcoming years, so we could indeed be witnessing the early stages of a true revival of American tennis. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with more content like this. What's next? Check out one of these 2 videos and I'll see you in the next one.